racing now because we've got about 3 minutes left, where the management of the whole thing is linked to the profiles we can do. They have to be individual, you know, they can be normograms, we can lay perfect profiles over the top so that the individual can see what perhaps they may be aspiring to. We can filter it, we can look at targets, groups, individuals, doesn't matter. It actually means we can absorb a huge amount of data and come up with that sort of stuff, which is quite specific to us in terms of management. Because when we start looking at, you know, what role do you do? Does your profile change when you go from Shenton Park to West Perth? Or do you change cities? The role you have in the organisation, what happens there? So we can actually compare and contrast that. We can track the changes so people can actually, under their own steam. And one of the big differences that the way we present stuff that managers, we give people responsibility to get in on their own portal and actually look at how their own data is changing. So it's quite powerful. And then specific interventions can be designed to suit people, rather than just talk the average, because it just doesn't apply in the health world. And I challenge you to think about what it does with your guys, and then that's the communication link. So, in summary, so we're getting there, and in conclusion, beautiful sort of few words. The concept is we really want, everyone wants to be healthy. I don't think anyone volunteers to feel shit out. Is that fair? Everyone thinks, yeah, healthy and happy would be fantastic. The challenge is, under our current system of management, that's not going to happen. Our healthcare costs are skyrocketing. I've just spent a week at the International Conference on Obesity. The drug company dominance is just staggering. Guess what the 2 most effective things you can do if you're carrying weight are?
Exercise.
And need to be less. You know, how can you patent that? You can't. And so the trade display was just enormous. And these things happen once every 4 years. So under the current system where everything is deemed to be medical, and when you run out of it being medical, we call it a syndrome. Polycystic ovarian syndrome. Now we've got the metabolic syndrome because we've got fat bastards and we don't know how to get them skinny. And guess what we're doing? We're now saying the same things to kids. The same model is now being applied to kids with the false understanding that there's no bloody data being collected. You can see I get a bit excited about this. The reality that we find is we're all different, particularly different. So the one size fits all really just doesn't work. So in our management plan, you've got to take a few steps back before you can get forward in a lot of cases. So we've got things like Mike Tyson, for example, who you'd all be familiar with. If you use the indice that we use for BMI, the body mass index, he's obese. No one's going to tell him. So,
he'll hit you with your reason.
Or he'll bite your ear off. That's what I was fearful of. I need both my ears. So what I'm saying is that just think about how all this fits together. Okay? And that's it. So if you've got some questions, I'm happy to tackle anything. Because we've got
5 more minutes.
5 more minutes, says the chairperson, who's I'm under strict instruction.
Do you put stuff into your profile?
Sorry?
Any sort of like mindset?
Well, the profiles can be anything. I mean, the profiles are profiles. I mean, we're working with some companies in town who are looking at the profiles of career, stress levels, mind and body profiles, health and fitness profiles. You know, we've done some here, which is a simple health check. The profile is straightforward in that once you formulate that, then you can compare and contrast that. We're just running some correlations, so you can actually now start seeing statistically what are the relationships. For example, with some of those industry sites, they want to compare the health and well-being of guys in Port Hedland, say, to the guys in down here, Perth. So we run the same profile and we can then compare and contrast. So it's fantastic because it also means that people can go live. Most of us have got a screen, we can actually input our data, we can change the data ourselves. So in terms of management, no longer do we have to, which we did for years, go around measuring everyone's blood pressure, measuring everyone's height, you can get that done at the local station, as in health station, as distinct from the train station or the bus station. Any other stations you can think of? So all we're saying is that when we look at health and management, we're actually looking at the individual quite specifically. And I think until we accept that, and that's the problem with the drug companies, in certain, like this thing called a double-blind crossover study, which you'd all be familiar with. I mean, I'll never trust one of them ever again. Because apart from height and gender and maybe weight, how do we know that we're the same? I mean, our data clearly shows we are not. And yet, we extrapolate from a small sample to the rest of the world. And it's quite staggering. I mean, all the metabolic data that I spent years working on in terms of the physiology was done on small cohorts of people at universities. Who else would volunteer to have a mouthpiece and collect all this gas regularly, other than a student trying to earn some money as a research project? And so we extrapolate from healthy, young, athletic people to the rank and file. And when we do the profiles of the athletes, guess what they come up at? Around about that 60-40 split that we're talking about. So there are cohorts, the fat burners, carbohydrates and the mixed burners. We're quite different. And so our challenge, I think, and I leave you with the challenge, even the work you do, is why do we treat everyone the same? Our data suggests the best way to manage the health of people, and also yourself, is to get some data and look at the plan that you can actually work. And we've now got some software that we've worked up that actually allows that to happen.
So who's got a grant to find out children's weights in Australia, the averages of things? Is that going to happen? And where does the adult ones come from? Are they Australian? Or?
No Australian.
No Australian.
No Australian. We've been living off the American norms, and they're the CDC, Centre for Disease Control, which are very reputable. But again, we make the assumption that our kids are similar or our adults are similar to the Yanks. And I would suggest, if you've ever been there, that we're not. I mean, do you want something with that? How many? So their incidence of obesity, for example, is up around nearly 34%. I mean, it's a third. What is nearly over 100 million people? So the kids stuff, and who's got a grant to do it? There's some longitudinal stuff going on the East Coast, but again, that's there's only ever been 2 surveys done on the kids, and they've both been done in the last 20 years. What's interesting is WACE here, the West Australian Institute of Sport, do a lot of surveys with, and you may see their talent identification stuff. They've got quite a significant amount of data. What I'm proposing is that I think that we'll find our kids in WA, as our obese population is in WA, quite healthy. Yep.
You don't live in the right areas.
No, I don't live in the right areas, but what I'm looking at, well, maybe I am, but what I'm saying is that I think we can then identify those regions that we perhaps could. I'm not saying there's no fat kids out there, because I did my original postgraduate work with obese kids. So what I'm saying is that let's not generalise, this junk food banning, and it's crap. Because 80% of the kids are still seeing the same ads, eating the same food, going to the same environment. So what are they doing that's working? So let's flip it over, change our thinking. And then I think we can manage people really effectively, because you're right, some pockets may need a lot of work done, whereas others, you just need to keep them swimming more every day. Rather than say, as Johnny Howard's saying, let's spend a whole pile of money and get every kid kicking footies after school. That's not going to work. We know that.
This could go on and on,
Yeah.
Mr. Mate. We could continue, couldn't we?
Well, maybe at the next conference we'll get a full gig and we can actually,
very interesting
expand the whole thing. And I must say, good on you for putting something on the art and science into a conference. The World Conference on Obesity, to get something on the art and science on a national scientific program was just about like pulling teeth. The scientists do not want to hear about what happens to the punter when they come through the door. They only want to look at the lab. So good on you and I compliment the group for giving us a chance to have a chat.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, thank you very much all for coming to this session. It's very dear to my heart. I actually work as an emergency nurse, so this idea of empowering people and having them take some control and get some information about what's really going on, as opposed to medical management of health, and therefore reducing self-management of health, is very interesting. And obviously, as an intelligent group, for you to take this information away and share it with your students, with your families, is very useful. Yeah. Thank you very much, Graeme, for sharing that with us on behalf of
alcohol. Red wine and chocolates, 2 of my favourite food groups.
I think we'll go straight on to the next session.
All right. And thanks very much for your